You're listening to KZSC's Voces, Críticas, Critical Voices. I am your producer and host, Silvana Falcón. Today, I am here with Dr. Rebecca London, Assistant Professor in the Sociology Department and Faculty Director of the Student Success Evaluation and Research Center here at UC Santa Cruz. Her research focuses on understanding the challenges faced by disadvantaged children and youth and the ways that communities and community organizations support young people to be healthy and successful. Using both qualitative and quantitative methods, she's conducted research in multiple fields, including K-12 and post-secondary education, health and wellness, after-school programs, welfare reform, the digital divide, and children's living arrangements. She holds a PhD in human development and social policy and an MA in economics, both from Northwestern University. I've invited her to talk about her education research and tell us about an ambitious new initiative she's a part of in the Bay Area called the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust. Welcome, Rebecca, to KZSC's Voces Críticas.
Thanks, Silvana.
So tell us, what is the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust, and how did the idea for this initiative emerge?
So the idea behind the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust is that we know from decades and decades and decades of research that more than half of what goes into the achievement gap for children and youth is from factors that are outside of the school setting. And so what children experience in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, they're coming to school bringing that, both the assets and also the challenges that they face in their communities. They're bringing that to school. And schools are hampered because they're only aware of what they can see in the school setting. And so the idea behind the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust is to try and bring those two together and to provide more information to schools about what's happening in children's lives outside of the school setting, and provide more information to other community organizations that are serving children and youth about what's happening to them inside their school setting, so that more information can be shared and children can be served in better ways in all of the settings that they experience, as opposed to having separate information in each setting.
So this seems like a very holistic way to approach education. Is that how you would describe it?
I would describe it as a whole child approach. The agencies we're working with right now are K-12 education, public schools. We're working with county offices of education and health and human services, juvenile probation, and child welfare. And so the specific areas are mental and behavioral health, child welfare, juvenile probation, and education. Now, that's just a start. We expect that we're going to expand. One of the first areas that we're thinking about is early childhood. There's a very robust early childhood education system and early childhood health and wellness programs in the 3 counties where we're working, Santa Cruz, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. And those folks have been at the table from the beginning and are eager to participate as well.
And so what are you hoping that this collaboration across these various sectors achieve short-term and long-term?
In the short term, what we're trying to do is build a data system. It's not that this information is never shared. If you're a probation officer and you need to know what's happening with the child in school because that child's about to go up in front of a judge, there's information sharing that happens. There's phone calls that are made. There are personal relationships that are brokered so that you can call your friend who's at the county or at the school and get some information. What's not available is up-to-date, in the moment, just-in-time information that, say, you're a judge or you're a probation officer or you're a school counselor, that you would need to make a decision in the moment. And so what we're trying to do, what we are doing, is we're building a data system, and it has 2 parts. The first part is a warehouse that will combine all of the data from all the public schools in the Tri-County area into one data warehouse. Now, this is important. Although these schools are collecting similar kinds of information, they're not sharing information on a student-by-student basis. So even here in Santa Cruz, say you are a student in Live Oak School District, you go to Live Oak Elementary, you go to Shoreline Middle School. Once you leave Shoreline Middle School and go to either Harbor or SoCal High School here in Santa Cruz, it's a different school district, and those data are not shared. And so if you're the principal of Shoreline Middle, you can't go into a data system and see how your kids are doing once they get to SoCal High School. It's a completely different system. And so what we're trying to do is link these systems across school districts so that if your child moves to a neighboring school that happens to be in a different district, information can be shared a lot more easily. Now, the way that data warehouse works is it's housed in the Santa Clara County Office of Education. It exists already. We're building on an existing infrastructure. And it's a live feed update every single night so that the information is current. Things like absenteeism, school disciplinary incidents, these things change on a day-to-day basis. And so it's really important that this information be updated every single day. And it is. We have funding to link all of the schools in all 3 counties, San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz, into this data warehouse. So that's one of the data systems. The second data system is to link that public education data to information from behavioral health, child welfare, and juvenile justice. Now, those data will remain in their very highly secure, confidential data. We don't just want them floating around anywhere for anybody to be able to see. And so we need to make sure that they're accessible only to the right kinds of role groups. And all of those are being decided by the agency themselves. So the agencies are deciding what kinds of information they want to share and with whom they want to share it. So a teacher, for instance, may not be able to access any of this information, but perhaps a school counselor or perhaps a principal would be able to access information. What kind of information? It depends on what the agency decides they want to share. But that system is not a data warehouse. It's being set up as a secure lookup system. So I have a child. That child is experiencing absenteeism and tardiness, and something seems really wrong. I'm concerned something's happening in that child's life. I'm the counselor at the school. I can go into this system and I can say, here's this child. Her name is, let's call her Teresa. I'm looking Teresa's information up. I can see she's not known to juvenile probation. They don't have a child by that name in their system. She's not known to county behavioral health. They don't have a child. But, oh, I see she is known to child welfare. And now that I know she's known to child welfare, I can look and see, okay, this is her caseworker's contact information and phone number. I can call. This child has an open case right now. So now I understand something's happening in this child's life. I would have no way of knowing that. I can get in touch with the caseworker. We can form a multidisciplinary team, and we can try and figure out how to serve this child inside the school system.
This also seems like it could be quite expensive for schools that are also experiencing budget cuts. Like, how have you guys thought through the budget issue?
So the system is being built right now with funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. We have a 3-year grant to build all the system, pipe all the data in. And so at this point, there's no cost to the schools to participate. The data warehouse I didn't mention comes with a lot of different dashboards and ways of organizing information that are really helpful to not just administrators, but to teachers thinking about how to serve certain segments of their student populations, either those that are achieving very well or those that are having trouble in certain subjects. And so it allows for looking at information about students in all different and new kinds of ways. We've had a lot of interest across not just our 3 counties, but all over the state and all over the country. And people are really interested in that part of it, even if they don't want to hook up to the rest of the agencies, because that part is so robust in providing information about students in schools. So it is expensive, but the cost right now is being borne by Chan Zuckerberg. That's the part for building the system. They're not covering the part that's about the research, which is the part that I'm working on.
I think what seems very appealing about this initiative is that if we can think about the whole child, then it gets us away from a punitive model of detention.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know that children bring to school a lot of things that are not visible to the teachers and the administrators, the counselors who are serving them in schools. And to be honest, I think expecting a child to recount their story over and over and over again in different settings re-traumatizes them. So if a child's been traumatized, they've been pulled from their home, they're now living in a group home or they're in foster care, that is a really traumatizing incident in a child's life. And so then to come to school and be expected to divulge that information so that the adults there understand what's happening, that's expecting too much. And so, this siloed approach where we expect children to be able to articulate in each and every setting that they're served what their needs are is unreasonable. And we as the adults should be able to work together to figure out how to serve children better.
I think it's a great point because sometimes as adults, we have problem articulating our needs. And so to have that burden put on a young person who's trying to just make sense of what's happening around them in the present moment is asking a lot. And I think I take your point about the re-traumatization. We don't want to do that. The description of the Silicon Valley Regional Trust states that trust is foundational here. Has trust been an issue in the past? What are some of the ways in which you gain the trust of the various partners here?
So trust is essential, and we named it the data trust for a reason, and the approach we're taking to build it is intentionally slow because what we're trying to do is we're working with over 200 representatives of different agencies in the 3 counties who are part of the 8 or 9 different working groups that we have for the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust. They are the ones who are deciding what the system looks like. Now, those are the agencies. There's a trust issue with the participants, right? The children, their parents, their families, and to be sharing this kind of information, very confidential, very private information on children and youth. We don't take that lightly. We know that in the wrong hands, these data could be used not for good, right? They could be used to harm children. They could be used to stigmatize children. They could be used to write children off. And we're very mindful of that. And our partners are also very mindful of that. We have some agreements that we've made about how we'll use the information. But ultimately, this is a big test, and we need to track it and understand it better as we're rolling it out. There's a consent process that's happening. And so children's parents have to consent for them, or their guardians have to consent for them to be part of the system. And they may choose not to do that at first. And we'll build it based on what we have. And it's imperative that the legal teams, that the practice teams for the data trust are in agreement about how these information will be shared and used, and what kinds of information will be shared and used, and to whom and by whom, and what will we do with that information once we have it, right? So we're just starting what we're calling a change integration process right now. We're going to be designing a system for capacity building with those designated users so that they understand not only what they have access to and how to get it, but what to do with it once they gain access to that information. And so we're pretty deliberate about this. We're moving slowly. We could have just built a system, thrown everybody's data in. We would probably be done in the next couple months, but it's a 3-year process, and we don't really plan to be fully implemented until the end of the 3 years, because we know it's going to take that long to be able to gain the trust that we think we need in order to move forward.
Trust is always hard to secure, but very easy to lose. And so I think being thoughtful about the building of this is really essential if you want it to have sort of the long-standing impact that I think you all are hoping to achieve here. So tell us about this team. You have educators, health and human services, legal advisors, engineers. How did you go about assembling this kind of wide-ranging and innovative, I think, team?
So here I credit Emeritus Professor Rod Ogawa, who was a professor of education here at UCSC for many years. Towards the end of his career, but just before he retired, he started working with some folks who were formerly from San Jose Unified School District. They're now at Santa Clara County, which is the county agency that oversees San Jose Unified. And they just had this idea that we needed better information about children and youth, and they started to think about it. Now, integrating data on children and youth for research purposes has been happening for many years, and they knew about that. But what hasn't been happening is this integration for practice purposes. So for research purposes, we've been linking data on education and child welfare, juvenile probation, other systems for many years. And we use it only for research. We can't report out child by child. Even if an agency who provides information for the research comes back and says, oh, can you tell me about this one child? Our institutional review board won't allow something like that to happen. And so they knew this was a huge problem that they wanted to overcome. And Rod was working really closely with the folks from Santa Clara County. They had this great data warehouse already in place. And they thought, what can we do to build on this? And then really it became a labor of love. Rod Ogawa and his tremendous commitment to this project are the reason why this project is coming together. He wrote grant proposal after grant proposal after grant proposal. He had a National Science Foundation planning proposal approved that allowed him to start to get the work done. It's actually against state law to share this information. And so he and the team worked with Assemblymember Mark Stone. We had legislation passed, was just signed into law this past October, that allows for the tri-county pilot of sharing information in this way. We work with 2 different outside consultants. One is called the IGES Institute. The other is Stewards of Change. There are legal and our technical consultants that are helping to build the architecture that we need, both legally and technically, to make this project work. I cannot tell you how much time these folks spend together planning, moving forward, trying to raise money, planning, moving forward, and gaining the trust of our community partners. It is an absolute labor of love, and it would not have happened without Rod.
So who else besides Rod from UCSC is involved in this work?
Well, right now, the primary people are Rod and myself. And I've been working really closely with Abel Rodriguez in the Baskin School of Engineering. He's a professor of applied mathematics and statistics. Also with Lisa Couture, who's a professor of computer science. The 4 of us together have been trying to figure out a way that we can bring this project to campus. There's a lot of different ways we can use the research. The computer scientists are interested in different aspects of the data than we are as social scientists. Social scientists. We want to answer questions about how we're serving children and youth. They're interested in the structure of the data, the missing information, the linking mechanisms, and so forth. And so we've been working together to try and figure out how we can bring these data to campus to be used by our campus researchers to do really important research on education and child well-being, and also to train our doctoral students about community-engaged research with a really strong, practical, experiential model, right? Because they can participate in these working groups. They can present their findings to the community. So we're interested in training them both in the statistical methods that they need in order to be able to analyze the data, but also this community-engaged research model, which is essential with these data, and writing and communicating with broad audiences, not just the academic audiences, but also community audiences, policy audiences, maybe even parents, students. And so we've written an NSF proposal for a research traineeship program. Even if we're not awarded that, we're thinking about ways of bringing this training model to campus starting as soon as next year or maybe the year after, because we have this really strong commitment on the part of both social sciences and engineering to make something work.
So for those who may not know, NSF is the National Science Foundation. And I wondered, Rebecca, if you could talk about what does community-engaged research mean for those who may be unfamiliar with that term.
Sure. So community-engaged research can mean a lot of different things. It has all different kinds of names. Also, you may have heard of it as participatory action research. The way that we're formulating it here is we are working with community. We have a research working group that's comprised of representatives of many different agencies across the 3 counties that will provide us with questions that the community wants answered in order to move forward in decision-making that they have to proceed with. And so they'll be populating us with a set of questions that they would like answered from the data. And then, of course, we at the university, we're free to bring to the data anything that we want to ask also and share back the results together. But the idea with community-engaged research is that the community is most familiar with the students. They're most familiar with their practices. They have a tremendous amount of knowledge that they bring to these data. We may be the people who can do the analysis, but they're the people who can make sense of it. And so if we work together with the high quality, rigorous research that we can do here at UCSC, and we can bring the findings back to the community and they can help us make sense of it, and importantly, know what to do with it next. And so that collaboration together for the research will make it much richer.
You're listening to Dr. Rebecca London, Assistant Professor in the Sociology Department and Faculty Director of the Student Success Evaluation and Research Center here at UC Santa Cruz. Her research focuses on understanding the challenges faced by disadvantaged children and youth and the ways that communities and community organizations support young people to be healthy and successful. So as researchers, we're on these trajectories, right? We're on these paths that lead us to future research projects. Often one research project leads us to the next. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your previous education research and how that has led you to this current moment?
Before I was at UCSC, I was a senior researcher at the John W. Gardner Center for Youth and Their Communities, which is in the Graduate School of Education at Stanford. And I was the lead researcher on an initiative called the Youth Data Archive. And we were, at that time, working with some of the same agencies, mainly in San Mateo County. And then we moved into San Francisco as well, where we were linking data for research purposes across different organizations. So, for instance, one initiative in San Francisco, we worked with the mayor's office and several others to do a project called Bridge to Success, where they were trying to understand how to help high school students in San Francisco Unified succeed once they get to City College of San Francisco. And so for the very first time ever, we linked the data between the two systems to track students from high school into community college. And I edited a volume published by Harvard Education Press called From Data to Action, Community Approach to Improving Youth Outcomes with Milbury McLaughlin, who was the faculty director of that center. And we had our partners in that enterprise from Bridge to Success in San Francisco write a chapter of that book. And it's called You Can't Point Fingers at Data, because what they told us was that previously in all of their meetings, they would sit around pointing fingers. Well, City College would say, you're sending us students who aren't prepared. And San Francisco Unified would say, your entry tests are too hard and our students are leaving our system proficient and you're saying they're not proficient. And so they were at an impasse because they really didn't know. They didn't know which one it was. Was it that the entry exams were too hard or that the students were leaving the system not prepared? And so what we were able to do is link those same students, look at their scores from high school, look at their entrance exam scores, and tell them a story about how it was going. And it led to some really big changes at City College at that time.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us on Voces Críticas today.
Thank you. This was great.